So, the president says he has a war against fossil fuels, but apparently that only is a war against domestic fossil fuels. He has no problem going to the Middle East or going to Venezuela, of all places, to get it. Why can't he just get it from America with American workers?
And now, the White House roller coaster ride on gasoline prices. President Biden has made no secret of the fact that he wants to reduce the use of fossil fuels. But by all accounts, he's moved too far, too fast in trying to get people out of oil and into electric. And now he's facing what could be monumental losses for Democrats in the fall midterm elections. And if that happens, he knows as well as anybody that his White House power base would be so weakened that he may not be able to get any of what he wants to do done. Joining us from Washington tonight, the former spokesman for Vice President Mike Pence, Marc Lotter. Nice to have you back, Mark.
No, thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with gasoline prices. Saudi Arabia and OPEC announced today that they're going to increase production to 648,000 barrels a day, probably starting in July and August. Also, along with Russia, which is going to be increasing its pumping of oil. Will that make up for what we're looking at the gas pump?
It might help a little bit, but it's not going to help overall when you see prices are nearing $5 a gallon, and most people think that it's going to $5 a gallon. But, to your earlier point, Doug, in your intro, you talked about, what the president is doing and going to Saudi Arabia. The question is, why isn't he going to Texas? Why isn't he going to Ohio and Pennsylvania? We are producing 1.5 million gallons fewer gallons today than we were in 2020. And our refineries are refining 1 million barrels less than they were just a couple of years ago. So, the president says he has a war against fossil fuels, but apparently that only is a war against domestic fossil fuels. He has no problem going to the Middle East or going to Venezuela, of all places, to get it. Why can't he just get it from America with American workers?
Well, it's a great point, and it illustrates yet another self-inflicted wound by this administration. They created this problem. Now they're going abroad to a place where we were free from any dependence on their oil. Now we're begging for them again, and it's a messy political situation because the Biden administration, as best I know, had created all kinds of problems with Saudi Arabia, but they were less significant in the sense that we were no longer dependent on Saudi Arabia for its oil.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is where the administration and the left are generally getting it wrong again. There are obviously serious civil rights issues in Saudi Arabia and in many parts of the Middle East. But the way to deal with it is not when they have us over a barrel of oil in this case, and we need their cooperation. It's when they don't have that leverage on us that we have the best opportunity of striking Middle East peace deals or striking deals that underscore America's interests. And that's what we saw under President Trump. And what we're seeing right now under President Biden is not only have you put yourself in a position where you have to beg for their oil, they have the power now to say yes or no without any preconditions that might be applied, whether it comes to human rights or other issues that we may need their cooperation on.
Do you think that I've asked many guests this question, and I'll ask you, do you think that it is the intention of the administration to get gasoline prices up to $7 a gallon, as Obama's Energy Secretary Stephen Chu wanted to do? He said, in order to make renewables marketable, economically viable in this country, we have to find a way to get gasoline up to $7 a gallon. Well, we're on the cusp of that happening now. Do you think this is all intentional?
Well, I think long term it is intentional. I mean, they had to realize, though, when you're coming out of a pandemic, in a recovery, and now in an inflationary period, that this is the last thing you want to do, not just because it hurts you politically and it's devastating politically, but it's also bad for the American people. And here's the bigger problem that I don't think that anyone has really addressed. We've got some of our experts here at the America First Policy Institute looking into it. But when we get into this new, green energy revolution, we're also going to be dependent. We're going to be dependent on China because they control mass amounts, the overwhelming majority of the minerals that we need to be able to produce the batteries, the technology, the storage, all of the things that they're relying on. those are coming from China. So we're just going to trade being dependent on one area of the world to being dependent on another. And that's not something I think they've thought through.
They control those minerals not only in China, but in Africa increasingly, and the solar panels, which are primarily made in China and at the hands of Uyghur slave labor, many reports indicate. I'm turning now to the broader issue of inflation and the administration's problems with that. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged just Tuesday this week, and I quote, "I think I was wrong then about the path that inflation would take." She's referring there to her comment last year that there was only a small risk of inflation. There are a lot of experts in this administration who seem to be getting it wrong.
There really is. And time again, not only are they getting it wrong, they're course correcting too late. I mean, we've seen this time and time again that they are leading from behind, not in front. I mean, whether it's Afghanistan, gas prices, inflation, baby formula shortages. I mean, I can't believe that the president yesterday said that he only became aware of this in April. And yet his HHS secretary has said that they were aware of it late last year. And regardless of whether it was April or last year, here we are, and the problem still persists. They didn't do anything about it, or when they did do something, it was too late. And I think that's one of the problems of this administration, is that they're constantly behind the eight ball. They're not out in front of any of these issues. That can come from obviously bad leadership at the top, but it's also, I think, a direct reflection of the staff. The staff have to be able to go in and say, I need your attention on this issue. It's coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, that illustrates this other problem. There is an apparent conflict, according to reports, between the staff and the President of the United States. As you said, he wasn't notified of this problem in the fall when it first happened. He only learned of it in April. He's blaming his staff. The staff frequently corrects the President of the United States. Who do you think is in charge? And what does that overall conflict say about the state of the administration and its governance, internal governance?
Well, I think they've gotten off from a bad start from the very beginning. I mean, we obviously knew, and we talked a lot about that on the campaign in 2020, about the capacities, from the president or then the candidate. But we're seeing it play out in action right now. Everything has to be carefully scripted in front of the teleprompter in their fake White House set that they built across the street from the actual White House. And really what we've seen is that every time they're putting out the president, things are getting worse. The message is not getting any better. And then when you have a president of the United States who reportedly, according to that report earlier this week, has to remind the staff that he's the president, I can guarantee you there was no question in the White House who the president was under Donald Trump. We all knew it, and he didn't have to remind us of it. He called the shots, and it was the same thing true with the vice president as well. And so you do have to wonder, and I also know enough about how the White House works. Statements aren't getting put out and being corrected or walked back unless the president knows. I mean, that's just, you don't undermine the president that way. And this is not a leak. These are walking back statements. It's one thing when they leak. It's another thing to be outright walking back a statement 30 minutes after it was made. You're not doing that unless the president, the chief of staff, or somebody very high up has authorized you to do that.
It almost makes one wonder if the staff is trying to sabotage the president because they're just looking at the poll numbers. We shall see. Marc Lotter, really appreciate your perspective. So insightful. Thank you.